I never thought I'd be the guy digging through his car for spare change. But at 55, after a messy divorce and $15,000 in debt, that was me. No savings, no plan, just shame. Today, I run a $2.5 million organic vegetable farm in Georgia. And I didn't get here by magic. I got here by doing what most people wouldn't. This is how I went from broke and broken to building something no one thought I could. If you've ever felt like your life was over, you need to hear this. I spent 30 years selling cars in Georgia. On paper, it looked like a solid life. Good commissions, a decent house, a wife, 2 kids, the usual trappings of success. But behind the sales smile, I was tired. Not just tired, hollow. I was always chasing the next deal, the next month's quota, the next excuse to avoid facing what I'd become. I drank more than I should, argued more than I wanted. I felt like I was just keeping up appearances while something inside me had already clocked out. But I told myself it was normal. Everyone was tired. Everyone was stressed. So I kept going, right up until the day it all came crashing down. The divorce hit like a wrecking ball. 1 minute, I was driving home from work thinking about dinner, and the next, I was living out of a suitcase. Years of tension had finally boiled over. We both said things we couldn't take back. The lawyers circled like vultures, and the bills piled up fast. I walked away from the settlement with my old car, a few clothes, and $15,000 in debt. She got the house. She got most of the savings. And I got the hollow feeling of starting over way too late. People think divorce is about who gets what, but what it really leaves you with is silence and shame and a deep, bitter sense of failure. I was 55 years old and suddenly a man with no plan. I didn't have a pension. I didn't have investments. I had a couple of job leads and a resume that said car guy, but not much else. And the thing about the car business, they want young blood, energy, hustle, not a guy with gray in his beard and baggage in his eyes. I ended up renting a tiny room behind someone's house, fold-out bed, shared kitchen, no privacy. Every morning, I'd put on my old work shirts and pretend I still had somewhere to go. But I didn't. I'd drive around, look for jobs, stare at help-wanted signs, and come home feeling smaller than the day before. Debt weighs on you, sure, but the loneliness, that's what really cuts deep. I stopped answering texts. I avoided calls from my kids. I couldn't stand the thought of them hearing the truth in my voice. I'd go days without speaking to anyone, just sitting in that little room, counting how much gas I had left and whether I could stretch the food in my fridge one more day. The world got quiet, but not peaceful, just cold. I started to believe I didn't matter anymore, like I'd aged out of usefulness, like I was watching life move on without me, and no one noticed I'd been left behind. I hit a point where pride gave way to survival. I started calling old friends, not to catch up, but to ask for help. That was the lowest kind of humiliation. You try to sound casual, like it's no big deal, but they can hear it in your voice. I borrowed $50 here, $100 there, always promising I'd pay it back. Most of the time, I didn't. I skipped meals, sold my old toolbox, and pawned the last watch my dad gave me. I remember sitting in a parking lot, counting coins for gas, thinking maybe I should just leave, not die, just vanish. Start over somewhere no one knew me. Somewhere I wouldn't feel like a failure every time I looked in the mirror. I packed up what little I had and moved to a rural town in Georgia no one had heard of. Told people I needed a change of scenery. But the truth? I couldn't afford rent anywhere else. I was running from the life I'd wrecked, from the looks, the questions, the embarrassment. Out there, the silence didn't mock me. It gave me space to breathe. I rented a run-down place with a patchy backyard and no distractions. No traffic, no meetings, no expectations. Just me some dirt, and time. I didn't know what I was doing yet, but it felt like I was standing at the edge of something different. I didn't call it hope, not yet, but it was quiet enough to think again. The first time I dug up a patch of dirt behind that house, it wasn't about farming. I was just tired of buying bland, overpriced produce. I bought a $2 packet of tomato seeds and a used shovel. What I didn't expect was how it made me feel. There was something about putting your hands in the soil, something steadying. I didn't have a job, didn't have a plan, but I had those seeds and a small patch of earth. Every day, I checked those plants, watered them, watched them stretch toward the sun. It gave my mornings a reason, a rhythm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't spiraling. I was growing something. I didn't know it yet, but that small act was the beginning of everything. It started by accident. My neighbor wandered over one morning, noticed my tomato plants were thriving, said they looked better than the ones in the store. I laughed and handed her a few, but she insisted on paying me $5 right into my palm. I stared at that money longer than I should have. Not because it was a lot, but because it meant someone saw value in something I'd done. That little exchange flipped a switch. Maybe I didn't need a resume. Maybe I didn't need a suit. Maybe I just needed to grow more tomatoes. I didn't call it a business, not yet. But I started to wonder, what if this wasn't just a fluke? I had about $1,000 left on my last working credit card. Most people would have called that money survival, rent, bills, food. I used it to lease a quarter-acre plot outside of town and buy basic tools, seeds, drip irrigation, and compost. I knew next to nothing about farming. I watched YouTube videos, read library books on soil health, and joined a local farming co-op to learn the basics. I had no tractor, no greenhouse, no safety net, just hope, caffeine, and pure stubbornness. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't stuck. I was moving towards something, even if I didn't know what yet. That first season nearly broke me. I dug rows by hand, planted in the heat, watered from a hose that barely reached the far end. My back felt like it belonged to a man 20 years older. My hands cracked and bled from the work. But every evening, I'd stand in that field, covered in dirt and sweat, and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the ego-driven kind I'd had selling cars, but something quieter, like I was earning back pieces of myself one blister at a time. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. And for a man who'd lost everything, that meant the world. At first, the old-timers didn't take me seriously. I was just some city guy with soft hands and big dreams. But I showed up every day without fail, asked questions, made mistakes, listened more than I talked, and slowly they started to share. Tricks passed down from their fathers, how to tell when the soil's too acidic just by smell, when to plant, when to wait, what the birds in the trees can tell you about weather. Stuff you can't learn online. These men didn't hand out praise, but when one of them said, "You're doing all right," it stuck. They didn't just teach me how to farm, they helped me remember how to be part of something again. I loaded up my old sedan with crates of tomatoes, cucumbers, and zucchini, and drove to the nearest farmer's market. No fancy signs, no branding, just me, a folding table, and produce in paper bags. Some days I sold out in an hour. Other days I brought everything home. But even on the bad days, I came back, because every sale felt like a step forward. Every thank you, every smile from a customer chipped away at the shame I'd been carrying. I wasn't just growing food, I was rebuilding dignity. It was slow, messy, uncertain, but it was movement. And for a man who'd spent years standing still, that was everything. When I first started telling people what I was doing, most didn't get it. Friends from my old life, the sales guys, the golf buddies, they called it a midlife crisis. Said I'd gone off the deep end. A few were more blunt, told me I'd fail, that farming wasn't a real path for someone like me. One even laughed and said, "You're not built for that kind of life." And maybe they were right. I wasn't. Not yet. But I didn't argue. I let their doubt burn in the background, like coals under the fire. I didn't need their belief. I needed discipline. I needed routine. And every time I felt tired or questioned myself, I remembered their voices, and I kept going. I'll never forget the day a local chef called and asked if I could supply him weekly with organic greens and herbs. I said yes before I even thought it through. Truth was, I had no system, no staff, no delivery plan, just a garden and a beat-up car. That night, I didn't sleep. I was out harvesting every ripe tomato, basil leaf, and zucchini I could find, cleaned and boxed it myself. I showed up at his kitchen just after sunrise, sweaty and nervous. But he looked over the crates, smiled, and said, "This is good." That was the moment I realized maybe this wasn't just luck. Maybe I could do this. And maybe people were starting to take me seriously. Saying yes to that restaurant opened a door, but walking through it meant taking a real risk. I applied for a $20,000 loan through a local farming co-op. I was scared out of my mind. I'd been in debt before, and I knew what it felt like to owe more than you owned. But this time, I had a purpose. I used that money to buy a used walk-behind tractor, irrigation pipes, and organic certification materials. I leased another acre of land and started growing higher-value crops like microgreens and heirloom tomatoes. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to life. I was planning ahead. I still worried every night. What if this doesn't work? What if I fail again? But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. Momentum. And that changed everything. There was a week that almost broke me. Rain hit hard, non-stop, for 6 days. My drainage wasn't ready for it. Whole sections of the field flooded, seedlings drowned. I lost nearly a third of my crop. I remember standing in the mud, soaked and angry, thinking maybe this was it. Maybe I'd pushed too far. Maybe I'd made a huge mistake. I sat in my truck that night and thought about quitting. But then I remembered what rock bottom felt like. The silence of that first empty apartment. The fear of checking the mailbox. And I realized I'd rather fight for something than go back to nothing. So I replanted, one row at a time. Hiring my first employee was almost harder than getting the loan. It felt strange, like I was pretending to be something I wasn't. I still felt like the guy scraping by, not someone who gave orders. But I couldn't do it all alone anymore. I found a kid from town, part-time, through the local co-op, showed him how to seed trays and pull weeds. At first I kept thinking, who am I to lead anyone? But then I saw him start to care about the work. He showed up early, asked questions, and I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. I wasn't just growing vegetables. I was building something that could feed people, and now employ them too. I remember the exact day I opened the books and saw it. For the first time, I'd made more than I'd spent. Not by a lot, but enough. Enough to cover costs, payroll, and still have some left over. I sat there, staring at the numbers, and I cried. Not because I was rich, far from it, but because I didn't feel powerless anymore. I wasn't waiting on some company to approve me, or someone else to tell me my worth. I was building value with my own 2 hands, and people were paying for it. After everything I'd lost, that moment gave me something I hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. One morning, a regional grocer reached out, said he'd heard about my produce from a restaurant client, asked if he could tour the farm. I showed him every row, every compost pile, every irrigation line. I told him how I avoided pesticides, rotated crops, and earned organic certification. He nodded the whole time, then said, "We want to carry your stuff." Weekly orders, wholesale prices. It was a huge leap, more volume, tighter timelines. But it meant stability, growth, a chance to move beyond just scraping by, to really build a future I could be proud of. Today I have 12 people working with me, most of them local, and a few had stories just like mine, down on their luck, trying to start over. Some were fresh out of school, others were older, like me, just needing a door to open. I didn't just give them jobs, I gave them trust, structure, a place to belong, and they gave it back tenfold. We built a team, not just a workforce. I walk the fields now and see them moving with purpose, solving problems before I even notice them. I'm not doing this alone anymore, and I wouldn't want to. It's not just my farm anymore, it's ours. I walk this land now, and I see more than soil and crops. I see the value of a life I built from scratch. Funny thing is, this farm, this patch of rural Georgia dirt, is worth more now than my old house, my fancy car, the title I used to hold at the dealership. But that's not what matters most. The real value is that it's mine. Nobody can lay me off. Nobody can take it away in a divorce. I know every inch of this land because I fought for every inch of it. When I look around, I don't see property. I see freedom. I see a man who finally owns his future, and that's worth more than any paycheck ever gave me. These days, I get folks reaching out, asking how I did it. Young guys, retired teachers, single moms trying to make ends meet. I started mentoring them through the local co-op, not as an expert, just as someone who's been through the fire and made it out the other side. I teach them soil basics, how to start small at farmers markets, and how to budget for lean seasons. But more than that, I try to give them belief, because I know how hard it is to move forward when the world keeps telling you you're done. I'm proof that you're not. For most of my life, I thought success meant money, status, the kind of car people notice when you pull up. I chased that for years, and it left me broke, bitter, and alone. Now, I live slow. I rise early. I sweat through my shirt by noon. But I end my day feeling whole. I don't need applause or titles. I want peace, a full pantry, a good night's sleep. I want to know I didn't run away when life got hard, that I stood up, took the hit, and built something better. What I got wasn't what I used to want, but it's exactly what I needed. When the farm started turning a profit, I didn't go buy a truck or take a vacation. I saved, then I built, slowly, piece by piece. I built a small house on the edge of the property. Nothing fancy, 1 floor, wood stove, porch facing the sunrise. But every nail in those walls, paid for by food I grew, every window, framed by hands that once couldn't hold it together. When I look at that house, I see every 4 a.m. harvest, every frost I fought through, every moment I didn't quit. It's not just a home. It's a monument to what happens when you bet on yourself and keep showing up. There's a kind of dignity I didn't know I was missing until I had it. I don't answer to a boss. I don't sit through meetings that drain the soul. I don't spend my Sundays dreading Monday. I wake up every day with purpose. Even when it's tough, when the tractor breaks or the weather turns, I still feel proud because it's my work, my mess to fix, my success to earn. And that's what freedom really is. Not lounging around, but having a life where your time is your own, where your values guide your choices. I never had that in my old life. Now I do. There's this moment I get sometimes, just as the sun rises and the mist lifts off the fields. Everything goes quiet. The air is cool, the ground still damp, and there's this golden light that settles over the crops like a blessing. That's when it hits me. I didn't just rebuild my finances or my career. I rebuilt myself. I went from broken to standing tall, from angry and lost to rooted and clear. Those quiet moments remind me that healing doesn't come loud. It comes in stillness, in breathing room, in knowing I'm exactly where I need to be. I lost everything and found myself in the dirt. If my story meant something to you, if it made you pause, think, or hope, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe, leave a like, and share your own story in the comments. I'm just one man who started over in the dirt, but I know I'm not the only one. What's one thing in your life you thought was the end, but turned out to be the beginning? And if you're walking your own path right now, especially one that doesn't make sense to anyone else, I think you'll really want to hear John's story. He left the road after 20 years of trucking and found a whole new life behind a camera. That video's up next.